All right, let's talk about a piece of law that honestly touches pretty much everything we do online, from banking to healthcare. We're going to break down Thailand's Cybersecurity Act, what it is, who's in charge, and the really tricky balance it tries to find between keeping the country safe and protecting our rights.
Just think for a second about the services you count on every single day. Your bank, the power grid, the hospital down the street. Now, what if a massive cyber attack took them offline? This isn't some movie plot, it's a real threat, and it's exactly why this law exists. It's all about protecting the digital engine that keeps the country running.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll get into why this law was even needed. Then we'll look at who's calling the shots. After that, we'll define what the government considers critical, dive into the 3 levels of cyber threats and the powers that come with them, and finally wrap it all up with the key things you really need to know.
So, first things first, why does this law even exist? Well, at its core, it's about setting up a national game plan to deal with digital threats, the kind that could seriously mess with the country's stability and day-to-day life.
The law's definition of cybersecurity is super broad. We're not just talking about your laptop's antivirus software here. This is about the big picture, protecting national security, keeping the economy humming, and making sure public order doesn't fall apart because of a digital attack.
And what's a cyber threat in the eyes of the law? Well, the key word here is intent. It's not an accidental system crash. We're talking about illegal actions where someone is actively trying to cause harm, to break things, or to disrupt computer systems and data on purpose. This quote from the Act's rationale really gets to the heart of it. The goal is to create a strong defense, but it also hints at a tough trade-off, acknowledging that to protect the whole country, there might be times when certain individual rights have to be limited. Okay, so to make all this work, the law didn't just lay out rules, it built a whole new command structure. You've got new committees, new roles, you gotta know who's who. Let's break it down. So you've got 2 main groups at the top. The easiest way to think about it is like this. The National Cybersecurity Committee, the NSCC, is the strategy board. The Prime Minister is in charge, and they set the big picture vision. Then you have the Regulatory Committee, and they're the boots on the ground, the Incident Command Center. They handle the real-time threats and set the technical rules. So one group plans, the other one acts. Simple as that. And who does all the actual day-to-day work? Well, that falls to the Office of the National Cybersecurity Committee, or the ONSC. They're basically the engine room that keeps both of those big committees running and turns their decisions into action. Now, this is really important. This law doesn't treat every business or website the same. Its main job, its biggest focus, is protecting the most vital services in the country, what it officially calls critical information infrastructure. So what in the world is critical infrastructure, or CII? Put simply, it's any computer system, whether it's run by the government or a private company, that is so important that if it went down, it would be a disaster for the country's security, its economy, or just public safety in general. And the law gets really specific, spelling out 8 key sectors. You've got the obvious ones, like national security. But it also covers things you use every day, like your bank, your internet and phone service, the trains and buses, the power and water to your home, and of course hospitals and public health. Basically, all the stuff that would cause chaos if it stopped working. All right, now we're getting to the part of the law that gets the most attention. And for good reason. It's all about how the government can respond to threats. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. The government's power grows depending on just how bad the threat is. So, the law creates 3 levels. Level 1 is non-serious. Think of it as a digital slowdown. But then you jump to serious. Now we're talking about a deliberate attack meant to break things and disrupt essential services. And then there's level 3, critical. This is the absolute worst-case scenario. A massive attack that causes a total system failure across the country, maybe even putting lives at risk. A true national crisis. So, what happens when a threat is labeled serious? The authorities can order a company, say a power company, to start monitoring its systems, to hunt for weaknesses, or to clean up malware. But here's the crucial part, the check on their power. If they want to actually go in and access that company's private data or systems, they can't just do it. They have to get a court order first. And it's the same story if officials want to take action themselves. They can enter a building to inspect things, sure, but for the really invasive stuff, like copying data, testing a live system, or seizing computers, all of that, and I mean all of it, explicitly requires a judge's permission.
This judicial oversight is meant to be a key safeguard.
Now, if a threat explodes to that critical level, the whole game changes. This is no longer just a cybersecurity problem. The National Security Council steps in, and the situation is treated as a full-blown national crisis, managed under its own set of laws and authorities. Okay, let's pull all of this together. What are the big takeaways? What are the key responsibilities and consequences we need to remember from this law, especially for the folks running our most important services?
A huge part of this law is being proactive. It tells these critical organizations you can't just sit around and wait to be attacked. They are legally required to do risk assessments every year, to constantly monitor for threats, and even to join in national cybersecurity drills. And most importantly, if something bad happens, they have to report it.
And there are definitely consequences for not cooperating. If one of these critical organizations gets hit by a major threat and doesn't report it without a really good reason, they could be looking at a fine of up to 200,000 baht. The law expects everyone to be on the same team.
So when you boil it all down, what you're left with is this constant tension, this balancing act. On one side of the scale, you have the government's very real need to protect the nation and keep things running smoothly. And on the other side, you have the need to protect our individual rights and freedoms from government overreach, using safeguards like that court order requirement. And that really leaves us with the million-dollar question, doesn't it? The law might have all these checks and balances written down on paper, but its true test is in how it's used in the real world. Does it actually strike that right balance between security and liberty? Well, that's the big question we'll all need to keep an eye on.